What is up? Welcome back to another episode of the Fit 40 podcast. Today we have an awesome topic on deck. We're going to talk about how to lose weight without losing your butt. Okay, this is a exciting topic for me because I really don't think I've actually touched on this, and this comes from a conversation I had with a fellow coach, Phil Dominguez, which if you haven't listened to the actually three podcasts at this point that me and him have done, go back and look back on them because it's going to cover a lot of things that we touched on in those previous episodes, but it's going to be a more thorough, like laid out plan of if you want to lose weight without sacrificing your most precious asset. See what I did there? Okay. This will tell you exactly how to do that. All right. So thank you to Phil. And before we jump right in, be sure to follow or subscribe if you're not already, wherever you're watching or listening, or if you're a returning listener, if you could rate the show or give it a thumbs up, that would be so great for me. I appreciate the hell out of you. And enough of that. Let's get on with the show. So let's talk about what exactly we need to understand before we dive into this topic, which is how to build muscle and how to burn fat. Okay, because the reason I say burn fat is even though that this is labeled losing weight without losing your butt, when we talk about muscle gain, which is how you build a booty in the first place, you need to build lean muscle tissue. When you do that, the concept of weight needs to go out the door, because when you build muscle, your weight will go up, or it might stay exactly the same while you lose fat. But we don't want to be so locked into the scale because that's going to hurt your efforts. If you're always trying to drive the scale down, building a butt is going to be damn near impossible. So going forward, let's really focus on burning fat rather than dropping weight and building muscle rather than chasing a number on the scale. All right, so how do we burn fat? We need a calorie deficit first and foremost. We need something that will result in you losing inches around your body and your clothes feeling looser. And we want to make sure that we support that with behaviors that influence a more favorable body composition, because you can lose weight, you can lose fat, but you could also lose muscle in the process. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maintain the most muscle possible. Things like making sure our nutrition is on point, especially when it comes to protein intake, maintaining a good balance of good stress. Okay. So we want to make sure that we reduce bad stress as much as we can. And we also don't want to overload it on good stress, like overworking ourselves to the point where it's a negative impact when it comes to things like exercise or something like that. Okay. Making sure that we sleep as best as we're possibly capable of sleeping, because especially when it comes to the stress and sleep, that'll impact your hormones, and your hormones will play a big role in where fat comes off and where it is stored. And along with that, another thing that helps with hormones, but also drives a lot of things in your body to build muscle, to maintain muscle, which is strength training, which is how we do part B, which is building muscle. Okay, so we burn fat and then we build muscle by strength training. But how do we strength train? Because unfortunately, social media is loaded with these booty building protocols that are absolute garbage, that don't follow the science, that just get people moving, which is great to begin with. But then they get pissed off because they hit a plateau or they don't see any results. And that's because it's missing the two big things, which are progressive overload and mechanical tension. Progressive overload pretty much just means you should be doing more work over time. You should be able to use heavier weights, and you should be striving to use heavier weights, not just stick with the same ones, unless you're okay with not building a booty, which I'm assuming that's not you if you're tuning in right now. And then making sure, or before I go into the next one, progressive overload also could be done by increasing repetitions. So those are the two big ways, like more weight or more reps, but you can also do it in a number of different ways. But for the sake of building a booty, those are the two you really want to focus on. And when it comes to mechanical tension, you want to be pushing these sets to the point where those last few reps are really hard, borderline, possibly not going to happen. So you always want to get to the point where the first rep never looks like the last. The first, like say you're doing a set of 10, 1 through 5 should look about about the same. And then 6, 7, 8, 9 should be getting harder, very hard. And you will notice that you're going slower, even though you're pushing just as hard. That's how you know you have enough mechanical tension. All right. And when it comes to booty building in particular, the exercises that you want to choose are most likely going to involve hip extension or abduction. So what is hip extension? Right now, I am sitting down and my hips are in flexion right now. So if I were to stand up, that would be my hips extending. So it's basically getting to the point where your knee and your shoulder, there's a straight line. So your hips Like if you're doing a bridge, for example, your hips are all the way up to the point where there's a straight line from your knees all the way to your shoulders, and you should be able to feel a squeeze in your butt. Okay. And that can be done on bridges, it can be done on squats, RDLs, lunges, all these things that we usually see. And then there's abduction. These are like when your knees go outward. You could be most likely you are in a flexed position. So it's like you're sitting down on something and pushing your knees out. Now, this could be done on that machine that you always see in the gym where you're just bringing your knees in and out and the pads are on the outside of your knees. And that'll push you to the point where you're using the muscles called like your piriformis and your glute med. And those are going to help shape the booty. And by doing that and using progressive overload, that will put the right amount of stress on the fibers you want, and it'll help you build the booty. So if you see these super high repetition ones that are like 20, 30, 40, 50 repetitions, and it just makes you feel like there's a crazy burn, but you're not able to do more reps over time, you're not able to do more weight over time, and you don't see any big significant difference in your butt, then you know it's just a bunch of BS. It's some influencer that's probably naturally gifted in that area, taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge on the subject. But that's not you, because we are going to go in full detail on this episode. So when it comes to the two types of people that there are when it comes to trying to build muscle, burn fat, you're going to fall into one of these two camps. Number one is you're going to experience newbie gains, or if you have been previously active, like you've done a sport of some sort that required you to get stronger or placed a demand on your body that built a significant amount of muscle mass, okay, you are going to be in this group of people that can build muscle and burn fat at the exact same time. Now, it won't last forever, but if you're in this group, you might as well take advantage because it's the best group to be in. All right. And then there's the second group, which requires periodization. These are people who their training age is now at a point where they're not going to burn body fat and build muscle at a significant rate anymore. And they kind of got to pick a side. And this usually happens in the first year or two of training. So if you notice that you don't see crazy results like you did in the first 6 to 12 months, this is probably you. So between these two groups, there's three paths that you can take. Okay, path number one is if you are in that newbie gains group or you're returning to activity after a long time off. And when I say a long time off, I mean like 6 to 12 months, like bare minimum. If you missed, say, a couple of weeks or a month or two, it's not going to be that drastic. And your potential for newbie gains is going to be so tiny that you're probably just better off periodizing. But if you're truly in that phase where you've been off for years, or you never even really stuck to a structured strength training program ever, where you focused on those things that we just talked about, progressive overload and mechanical tension, if you've never done that, this is probably you. So worth a shot. So what do we do on this path? Number one, make sure that you're strength training properly. Okay, you want to make sure that when you are exercising, you are doing one, the progressive overload and mechanical tension, and two, making sure that you're doing enough sets at a high enough frequency, at a high enough intensity. So you want to make sure that you're doing the required things, like the movements that will actually get you what you want, like doing hip thrusts, like doing squats, like doing RDLs, the hard, heavy stuff that a lot of times people usually swap out for like these banded exercises or cable kickbacks, which are also great, but they should be sprinkled in. They're not the main dish. The main dish needs to be these heavy compound movements to get the best result in the quickest amount of time. All right. And when you're doing this, you also want to be in a modest calorie deficit or maintenance. All right. And what that'll do is it'll reduce inches, and you will either maintain or gain weight while doing this. So we know you're burning body fat because your inches are starting to go down, and we know you're building muscle because your weight has stayed the same even though your inches have reduced, or you're gaining weight even though your inches are reducing as well. So we know that that gained weight is muscle. So that's a really good tell. You always want to keep track of your inches, and you want to keep track of your weight, and you want to also keep track of your performance in the gym, because if you're able to add more weight, add more repetitions when you're doing these exercises, you can pretty much safely assume that you are gaining muscle. All right. So that's the newbie gain path. Path number two is when we need to periodize, when we need to choose a path. So one of those two paths is either we got to lose first or we want to build first. So losing first means that we're going to be losing that body fat first and then incorporating the building protocol afterwards. Or we could talk about flip flopping that once we go over this. So let's assume that your number one priority right now is losing body fat, and then you plan on getting to the muscle building part where you can build the booty. So first, we want to hold on to or muscle or get these like micro gains along the way while you're losing body fat. So in the very beginning of the program, you might still be able to make these gains in the gym, be able to add a rep or two here and there, maybe add 5 pounds, but you're going to experience a plateau. And then that's basically like we need to fight for our lives to keep that strength where it is and keep that muscle as best as we possibly can so we don't lose the muscle while we are burning body fat. And the goal with that modest calorie deficit, because we don't want to cut our calories super low to the point where we're sacrificing lean muscle, because that's the big thing that we don't want to have happen. We want to see the inches come down. Now, with all this going on, like if you do experience the micro gains in muscle while you're also losing fat, you might see your weight just stagnate in the very beginning, which is totally normal. But if your inches are going down, we know you are burning body fat. Okay. So with that, after a few weeks, you should experience weight to start to go down, or the inches continue to go down and you are able to gain muscle a little bit. And maybe you are holding on to that newbie gain phase a little bit, just you're recomping. So just ride it. But if you eventually get to that point where you're losing inches and you're losing weight at the same time, you know you're safely in a calorie deficit, and we need to get to the point that you want to get to. Now, let's say you want to build first, or let's say you've already lost and you want to now start focusing on, okay, I'm at the body fat level I want to be at, time to build the muscle, like time to build the booty as much as I possibly can. Okay. What we want to do is focus on maintaining or gaining inches with maintaining or sorry, with maintenance or surplus calories. So if you want to build the most muscle possible and go back and forth with build as much as you can, then burn body fat and just go back and forth between surplus deficit, you could totally do that and max out on your gains that way. Or you could take the slower approach where you do a very small surplus or you stay at maintenance and you focus on building muscle slowly but surely, but you don't gain the same amount of body fat as if you were to go into a higher surplus. So really up to you on that. But the goal is to maintain your inches as best you can and then gain weight. So that way we know if your inches are not budging, but you're gaining weight, that means you're building muscle. And when I say inches, especially if we're talking about the glutes, the main thing we want to focus on is our waist and our neck. So assuming we're not doing neck exercises or crazy heavy weighted crunches where all of a sudden our waist is going to start expanding, assuming we're not doing that, keeping a hip measurement would more serve to prove that we're building muscle. So you almost want to see your waist stay the same, but when you measure your hips, which is the widest part of your butt all the way around to the pubic region, you want that part to grow because we want the booty to grow in this situation. And while we're doing this, like when you're focusing on building muscle and you're in maintenance or a surplus, this is a prime time to focus on things like boosting your energy levels, optimizing your sleep, managing your stress better, and getting in tune with your hunger signals so you understand, hey, based on these calories that I'm eating and based on how I feel hungrier or more full or whatever, now you can start to make the connection of, okay, when I feel this way when I'm eating these types of foods, this is about where I am on calories. And then you can kind of get into that place where you may be able to shift into a more intuitive approach if you want to. All right. So, like I said, you could go either way with this. You could start and build first. And honestly, for a lot of people, especially when it comes to the crowd of people that are under muscled or people that have insulin resistance or PCOS or going through menopause where they're at risk for losing muscle, losing bone mineral density, I would honestly build first. And that's what I do in the kickstart, which is like we get our basics down, like we eat properly, we strength train, but we're not jumping into a deficit automatically intentionally because you want to get these things down first. And the more muscle that you have, the easier it's going to be to burn body fat. So for most people, I would highly, highly recommend building muscle first before losing fat. But I know It's human nature. We want to see specific results fast. We want to see the scale go down. We want to see the inches go down. And if that's what you want to do and you're able to do that in a sustainable way, and when I say that, I mean you don't have to go to 1,200 calories or 1,000 calories or lower. If you're able to do it on like 15 to 1,800 calories, if you're a female, and if you're a male, if you're able to do it somewhere between like 23 to 2,800 calories, that's usually very sustainable. So if you can do that, by all means. But if you're in this position where you feel like you have to live this unsustainable lifestyle, then build the muscle. Please, 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 please. Just take some time and build the muscle. All right. Now, that being said, some closing thoughts. I want to hammer home that this will, like whatever approach you take, when you do reduce body fat, chances are your butt is going to get smaller because a lot of us hold a lot of fat in that area, especially the ladies, since we like when we compare apple to pear shape, like ladies are a little more pear shaped because they hold it in the legs and the booty more. And the guys are a little more apple shaped because we hold it in the chest and the belly a little bit more. So because of that, if you are a lady and you want to build your booty, just know it's probably going to reduce in size because that's where we hold a lot of fat. But I will tell you that, at least from anecdotal experience working with clients, it will be firmer and it will sit a little higher up. One of my clients, Deb, comes to mind. She's like, yeah, I don't know what happened. It felt like my butt raised overnight. And I'm like, hey, not a bad thing, right? And along with that, it's going to be a lot stronger, which for multiple reasons down the line are really, really beneficial. One of them being it's going to potentially reduce your risk of falling later in life when your hips are stronger. Now, coordination is potentially one of those things that could throw you off and result in a fall. But we don't want strength to be the reason that you fall later in life, because when you fall, your amount of time is most likely going to be trimmed down. So we don't want that to happen, especially for strength purposes when you're in control now and you can do the things that are necessary. So along with that, we want to make sure that you can always continue to grow with proper training and nutrition. Even if it reduces in size right now when you are losing the body fat, you can always build, build, build as long as we're following the guidelines of pushing it harder in the gym, fueling ourselves properly, and you will get to a point where you should feel pretty satisfied with the results. So that being said, I hope you found this very helpful. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat on topics like this. If you find me on Instagram or Facebook, always happy to chat. But just know that before we close this out completely, if you want a full dose of exactly what I talked about and just have somebody tell you, do this, do that, that's what Fit 40 coaching is for. And that's what the Fit 40 Kickstart is for, that I do at the beginning of every single month. So if you want to get set up for next month, because as this releases today, I just started the March class of the Kickstart. So if you want to get in for April, or you're listening later and you want to get in for this upcoming month, then go ahead, submit an application, and let's get you started getting the results that you want. And if in the meantime, after you apply, if you want some really good daily tips and you want a supportive community, get your butt in the Fit 40 Family free Facebook group. And you'll also get some free recipes and workouts to get you started just by joining. All right. Thank you for tuning in all the way through. I will see you next time. But until then, go kick some ass and screw the scale.